Hello and welcome to today's Bitrix24 webinar, Total Telephony. Thank you for joining today. So first of all, who are we? We are Bitrix24 Gold Partners Intreface. My name is Sam Connor, a sales engineer here at Intreface, and we're based in the UK, in the US and Hong Kong. And what we do is we provide a full range of services to help you with Bitrix24, starting off with pre-sale support, so we can discuss your requirements and see if Bitrix24 would be a good solution for your business. If it is, we can then implement the software for you. We can set up the system for your specific requirements. If you're looking at a self-hosted edition, we offer hosting services for the self-hosted solution, and we can then also provide you with detailed and comprehensive training and ongoing dedicated support. Okay, so if you've joined the Total Telephony webinar today and to get a more understanding of Bitrix24, it is a collaboration suite of well in excess now of 35 plus tools to help you really in managing your organization. And specifically today, we're going to be looking at the ability to integrate telephony into Bitrix24 so you can receive calls and also make outbound calls directly in the Bitrix24 system. And Bitrix24 is available in two solutions. So we have the cloud edition and the self-hosted edition. And prices start from $19 per month for a cloud system and just under their $1,500 for a self-hosted 12-user edition. Okay, so today's webinar, Total Telephony. First of all, we need to understand why should you use Bitrix24 to manage your telephony requirements. So first of all, Bitrix24 out of the box, it does have a ready built-in phone system. So you can easily and quickly rent a number from Bitrix24, and that's you ready to make outbound calls and receive calls directly in the Bitrix24 system. It also integrates fairly easily with existing PBX systems, so those private branch exchanges, if you want to connect with your existing phone provider. The integration is able to feed those calls directly into the CRM system. So if you have an existing contact in the CRM, it will pop up with their details and it can record those calls directly in that contact page. There are also reporting tools available within the Bitrix24 telephony module, and we'll have a look at those later on in the webinar. I think really importantly, first of all, if you did rent a number from Bittrex, it is very low in terms of a setup cost. So numbers will cost ranging from $4 to $6 per month. So it is a fairly low cost solution for you to integrate telephony services into your system. And it's important, first of all, before we go into have a look at the integrations, it's important to understand there are two different options in terms of telephony integration in Bitrix24. First of all, you have Bittrex telephony. So this is where we can rent a number from Bitrix24 and use that number as our telephony integration. Or the second option is actually integrating with your external phone provider. So if you want to use an existing telephone number that you've had for a long period of time and you want to keep that number, then an integration is the option that you should be looking at. Okay, so first of all, though, we're going to have a look at how we can integrate and set up Bitrix24 telephony. So that's going to be what we look at first of all. So we're going to see how we can set up the system and use this as a virtual phone system inside our Bitrix24 system. And then we'll see how this integrates with the CRM system. So we'll see how we can receive the calls and directly record those calls directly in your CRM platform. And then we'll see as well how we can use the mobile app as well to manage those calls. Okay, so let's go into our Bitrix24 system. And in terms of managing telephony, the area you want to go to actually start managing your setup is within the telephony module. So in here you will have your telephony area, and that then shows you all of the details inside your telephony module. So the first option we were looking at today is the Bitrix24 telephony. So what we can do is, you can see here the rent a number option, and this is the Bitrix24 telephony option. So if you're happy to use a new number, this is a fairly cheap way to quickly set up your telephony integration. So first of all, you need to select a number that you want to rent, so you can then reuse that number in your Bitrix24 system. So first of all, you want to select a country. So I can select from a range of countries in the system. So let's choose the USA. I then need to choose the type of number that I want to use. So this can either be a local or a toll-free number. So for example, if I choose toll-free, I can then select my category. And you can see there I'm going to be charged $6 per month. So within general, depending on the country, you're going to be looking at approximately $4 to $6 per month to rent a number from Bitrix24. And once you've rented that number, you then need to add credit into your account so you can then make outbound calls. So that's really as difficult as it gets in terms of renting a number from Bittrex. You just simply select the country and the type of number you would like to use. One thing to mention, in certain jurisdictions, such as, for example, here I've selected Ireland as the country that I want to rent this number, you do need to provide a valid postal address for certain locations. So this could be, for example, a utility bill to show your organization's address. And failing to provide that address detail could potentially mean you're disconnected from using that number. So that's something to bear in mind before you go ahead and rent those numbers. Okay, so once you have connected that number, it's going to show in your personal numbers section here. So we can see we have a number here that we have rented in the system, and we can then start to configure those numbers for our specific requirements. So this is where we can now set up our virtual phone system. So I can go into the configure button here. And this will show me all of my numbers that we have connected. So you can see this one is rented and we're paying $6 per month to rent that number. And I can click on the menu here and I can then start to configure the details for this specific number. So first of all, we can set up our process for managing inbound calls. So this is where we can start to set up our virtual phone system. So first of all, for example, we might want to play some welcome music, or if a user in Bittrex is not able to answer the call, we then might want to set up certain actions. So maybe we want the customer to leave a voicemail, or maybe we want to forward this to a mobile device. So you can customize what options you want to happen during that inbound call. We can also set up an Ivr menu, so a voice menu that the customer then selects from a choice of options to actually start to route that call to specific people. So for example, here we have set up one menu. So on here, we can select option 1 and the call is going to be forwarded to a specific employee. But it could be, for example, we want this to go to a group of people. So let's say we want to send this to everybody within maybe the sales team. So if we choose option 2, it's a sales inquiry. That call can then be forwarded to everybody associated to the sales group. So that's a really fairly common approach when using an Ivr menu. You may have one option for sales, another option for support. And what you can do in Bittrex is you can set up your groups so you have the specific people in the appropriate group. So those calls that they are going to be fed in the Bitrix24 system, they are specifically associated to their skills and traits. So you can add all of your options into here, and then you can add your specific menu into here as well. So here you add your actual text that will get relayed to the customer to detail the different actions that are available. So for example, 1 for Max Smith, 2 for sales. So that would work well for the actions we have created in here. So we can select the language, the speed that the message will get relayed to the customer, and the volume. So you can customize exactly how that message is relayed to the customer in the system. Another option is you can actually, rather than type out the message there and have that replayed, you can actually just record your own audio file of that message. Okay, so we've mentioned there how we can set up groups, and here is where we can actually then start to set out those groups. So here is where you would add the users into their relevant groups in the system. So we can say here for the sales team, we're going to add each person into that sales group. We can then move on to the integration into the CRM system. So when a call comes in, we can have that call recorded in the system. So first of all, if we go into our recording and rating, I can save those messages directly in the CRM system. So you can turn on or turn off this feature. Depends on what your maybe legal obligations are. You may have to record those calls, and we can then play a recorded warning message to the customer to let them know. And in terms of integration there as well, we've mentioned here, so we might want to, if the number's not recognized in the CRM against a client, we could automatically create a brand new lead in the CRM system. And maybe you have certain hours that you're available to manage calls, so you can also set up your own working hours. So this then decides actually what time people are able to actually make calls to that phone number. So out of that period of time that you say you're available, we can then play an out of hours recorded message and enable the voicemail feature. Okay, so we can configure all of those settings for every single individual number that we create in the Bitrix24 system. And we mentioned how that can then integrate with the CRM module. So we may have lots of client data stored inside our CRM system. And when a user then calls into this number, we can pull that information so you can see who is calling into the system. So let's just now have a user call this number that we have rented, and you can see how this displays in the Bitrix24 system. Okay, so we can see now Mark Moon has called our rented number, and it's opened up a pop-up window. We can see their details in the system here, and I can answer that call directly in here. I could transfer, and for that demonstration, I'm going to reject this call. So that's how that will look and display for your users in the system. It will pop up with that display and details about the person who is calling. And as we've seen where we configure that in the system, we can automatically route those calls into specific people in the system. Now, inside the CRM, we have direct integration. So I could click, just gone into the CRM module here, and we've gone into a contacts page. I could click and call directly on that user, and I can call them in the system. So you have the click to call functionality directly in the platform. And if we just go into another contacts page, we can have a look at those call recordings that we've mentioned. Okay, so we've gone into the CRM, and let's go into one of our contact pages. So in the CRM here, similar page that we've just looked at, but we can see here we've got a call, and that this call has been recorded. So we can see all of the details about the call, and I can play that call back in the page.
So using this, I can forward it to...
Okay, so that we can play those calls back. Maybe if you have meetings with your customers, you need to be able to understand and play back what the conversations were. This is a really easy way to manage that. So I can play those calls back and listen back to what the conversation was before then calling the customer for the next follow-up call. Okay, within the system as well, if we just go into the CRM lead area, this could be a very common area where maybe you manage outbound calls, so you might want to call certain leads within your platform. So what you can do is you can actually create your own call lists. So I might want to select certain types of leads in here that I want to create a call list for one of our team members for. So I can select the leads in here, and then from here I'm going to actually create a new call list. So I can create this as an activity for our agent. So it's going to bring that group of leads into the system and create this new call list for them to work their way through. So I can choose when this call list is going to take place. I can add details. Okay, so I can add that into here. And I'm going to choose who is responsible for dealing with that call list. So I can then create that as an activity in their CRM system. So you can create lists inside here, and we can then go into here and see that list, and I can then start calling my way through those leads in the system. So you can create call lists, and it's a call center feature to be able to maximize the amount of time users are speaking with their leads and clients on the phones. Okay, so let's look at creating call lists. And we can also use some of those features in terms of telephony in leads and in deals. So what we have in leads and deals is automation. And what you can do during the automation processes is use the telephony features. So if I go into our automation area, I can go into our client communications, and what we can do is we can set up a robocall. So this is where a call would go out to the lead in this instance. So a call would go out to them, and if they then answer that call, the message we add into here will get relayed to that lead. So it could be, for example, I'm going to add a message into here, and it can be dynamic, so it populates with their information. Okay, so I'm going to type out the message, and this would then get relayed to the customer when they answer that call, and we can select the type of language, the speed and the volume, or we could upload an audio file into here. And that would then automatically take that call at a certain stage of this process. So if we added that into, for example, the new lead stage, once the email has gone, we could then create that robocall, and that could then be automated during this sales cycle. Okay, so let's look at the Bitrix24 telephony integration. If you have any questions, please add them into the chat box and we can run through those for you. Okay, will this webinar be available after the broadcast? Yes, absolutely. So we are recording this session, so we will send this over to you within the next, hopefully 24 hours. You'll have access to this recording. Okay, so another question here. Can you decide which telephone messages are recorded in the CRM system? So what you can do is you can turn on and turn off the call recording feature. So if we just go back into our Bittrex CRM system, and let's go into the telephony area. Okay, and we're just going to go back into configure our number. Okay, and now we're just going to go into the recording section. So you can turn on and turn off the recording call feature, but it does that for every single call. So if you wanted to have selected calls recorded in the CRM, it's not really possible. You either turn on the recording feature or you turn off the feature. Within the CRM, if you're the administrator, you could then delete those calls out of that contact page, for example. That would probably be how I would recommend you manage that process. Okay, can you explain the cost for telephony? So, as we've mentioned, in terms of telephony, and can you mention the difference between the cloud and self-hosted? In terms of the renting of a number, you simply select the country you want to rent that number from. And as I say, that would be approximately $4 to $6 per month for each number that you rent. Inbound calls are included in that renting of the number, and outbound calls are charged per minute based on which country you are calling to. So these are the call rates if you're renting a number from Bitrix24. They use Vox implants, so that is the telephony provider behind the integration. And I will add this into the GoToWebinar dashboard so you're able to access this particular link. So I'm going to add this into the chat area for you. But in terms of the difference between the cloud and the self-hosted, there is no difference. If you're renting a number from Bitrix24, the costs are identical across both platforms for the renting of the number and those costs that would be for the outbound calling. Okay, so as far someone's asking about the SIP connector, so we're going to be moving on to the SIP connector shortly. So that's another alternative if you don't want to rent a number from Bitrix24. If you want to keep your existing numbers, then another option is using the SIP connector to connect with your phone provider. So we're going to look at that option in a second. Okay, if there are any other questions, please do add them into the chat window. So one more question, do employees have extensions? Yes, you are able through the configuration to add extensions for each employee. Okay, so what we've looked at so far is the Bitrix24 telephony option. So as we mentioned at the start of the webinar, there are two different options. One is the Bitrix24 integration. The other is the separate section is the integration feature. So it could be, for example, you have an existing phone number that your business has used for a period of time and you want to keep that number. So it could be that you need to, for your business, to keep that existing number in the system. Or it could be maybe you've got a very good contract or good call package with your phone provider, so you want to continue with that billing arrangement rather than use a new rented number from Bitrix24. So there are quite a few reasons why you might not want to rent a Bitrix24 number and instead integrate your existing number into Bitrix24. And there are different ways that this can be done in the system. So we're going to have a look at these different ways. There is the Bitrix24 SIP connector. There are also app integrations, and really following those two aspects. If that's not possible, the third way is using the API to build a brand new connection. Okay, so before we look at the SIP connector, I just want to go into look at the app integrations, because this is probably the first area you would want to look at to see if there is an app available for you to integrate with. So if we just go back into our telephony module, what you can see here is we've rented that number first of all, but if we don't want to rent that number, we need to look at an integration. So first of all, you want to go into the App Store. And what you want to check is if there is already a ready-made integration with your phone provider. So here we can see the selection of phone providers that there are integrations with. So for example, quite a popular integration is the Ring Central application. Okay, so within here we can integrate with our Ring Central phone provider, and that would then allow our team to receive calls directly in Bitrix24 and make those outbound calls. Now, just one thing to mention with any of those phone providers that do have an app, just make sure that you have the correct package. So for example, here with the Bitrix24 Ring Central app, you need to have a premium or enterprise Ring Central plan. Okay, so that's really the first choice. If you're wanting to keep your existing phone provider, check if there is an integration in the App Store. The second option is then to use what we call the SIP connector. And this is a way of connecting with your private branch exchange. So if you have an Office or a Cloud PBX, or if you can provide your SIP trunk details, you can keep your current phone number and get access to all of the Bitrix24 telephony and CRM features by using the SIP connector. So you can see here we have the Office PBX and we have the Cloud PBX. So you need to check and understand which edition you have if you have a Cloud or an Office PBX. But the functionality that we're going to show here is exactly the same for both the Office and the Cloud. So once I've opened up this, I've gone on the Cloud PBX. What you need to do is in the top right hand corner, you need to click on the Connect PBX button. And this will then open up a form where you need to input specific details associated with your PBX. So once you've done this, it will then show inside here your connector, and you then have 60 minutes to test and configure that connection. So you can make 60 minutes of outbound calls to make sure that the connection has been successful. And there is documentation, so there is a training course on here that you can use to help you in connecting your SIP connector. Or here at Intreface, if you contact sales@intreface.com, if you can send over your PBX details, we can test out the connection for you. And once you've done your testing and connected, and hopefully that works okay, you then need to purchase the SIP connector. And the SIP connector will cost $49 per month to actually rent that SIP connector. And you can then import as many phone lines as you require. Okay, so that's really the second option. If you've checked the App Store, if your phone provider is not in the App Store, the next place to check is to see if we can connect using the PBX system. So we can then connect your phone numbers into the system. And they would then display in here where my numbers are. And just like with the rented number, you would then be able to set up any configurations on those numbers. Really, the third option is if neither of those options work for you, we can look to use the API. So if the integration isn't achievable, we can look to use the Bitrix24 API system to actually develop an integration with your phone system. Now, to build an API integration, you could be looking anywhere in the region of up to $20,000 for development work. So we can talk with you and discuss those options to see what is the most suitable option in terms of telephony integration for you. Okay, so let's look at the ability to integrate different integrations with Bitrix24. Okay, so just let's have a look at some questions that we've had come in. Is it possible to integrate analog system or only digital? So we need some more details about what system it is that you're trying to integrate. We need to see if we can use either the features in the App Store, or if we have to use the SIP connector, we need to check if it's possible to use those features to integrate with your system. So if you can email sales@intreface.com, the details are on the slide here, then we can arrange a meeting with you to discuss your specific integration. Okay, do all of the phone options charge for outbound calls? We have a long distance program in place on our cloud PBX. So no, not at all. So if you were to rent a number from Bitrix24, that is where those outbound call rates come into play. So this is the charges per minute for outbound calls, but that's only if you integrate and rent a Bitrix24 number. If you integrate your existing phone provider and your phone numbers, either using the App Store or the SIP connector, you would just pay whatever your existing contract rate is with your phone provider. So that's one of the reasons why you may want to integrate your phone provider into Bittrex. If you've got a very good call package, say on your outbound calls with that phone provider, you don't pay an additional cost on those outbound calls. It is simply the contract that you have in place with your phone provider. So the outbound call charges per minute, just to be clear, that what you can see on here, that is only if you rent a Bitrix24 number. Okay, so if there are any other questions, please add them into the chat box and we'll go through those before the end of today's webinar. Okay, so we've discussed cost quite a lot throughout the webinar today. So we've mentioned about the Bitrix24 telephony call rates, and the link to those call rates is in the chat box in your GoToWebinar display. So if you rented a Bitrix24 number, you would pay per minute based on the location you are calling. Inbound calls are included in the cost of actually renting the Bitrix24 number. If you're going to use the Bittrex SIP connector to actually connect your existing phone numbers and your existing phone provider into Bitrix24, that will cost $49 per month. And you would then just continue with your existing contract that you have with your phone provider. If you use the apps that are available in the App Store, those apps themselves to install are free of charge, and you would just continue with your existing contract. So for example, if you did install the Ring Central app, you would just continue with the contract that you have with your Ring Central business. Okay, so in summary today, we've looked at how we can set up a virtual phone system in Bitrix24, how we can route calls to specific people or groups of people, and create our very own voice menu to channel the customers to route the call into specific groups of people. We've checked how we can integrate those phone calls directly into the Bitrix24 system and answer those calls in the portal. And we've seen how that integrates with the CRM system. So it will pop up with that person's information when their call comes into the system, and those calls can be recorded directly in the Bitrix24 system. In terms of reporting, let's just quickly have a look at the reporting tools in the system. So we have within the telephony module a call statistics area, and this is where we can start to build out our call history. So if I look at, for example, the last 90 days, I can see all of the different calls that have come into the system. And this is currently looking at the statistics, so how those calls have been distributed across our team. So I can see those details across all of our employees. I might want to look at the actual time period that calls are maybe answered in the system, so we can create our own specific periods for reporting. So let's look at the last 90 days of put reports in here. So I can see how often our calls are being completed in the platform. And this is quite a nice graph to look at as well. Maybe looking at the call density. So you can create your own filters again, and we can then see what time periods within the day that we are most busy. So this could be useful if you want to schedule your staff during the busy periods. You can look at the history and analyze when in your days are the busiest time periods for calls in the system. So you have lots of different reports that you can create in the call statistics area of the telephony module. Okay, and so let's look at reporting there, and we've also mentioned about the low startup costs for integrating with telephony services with the Bitrix24 platform. The call rates that we've discussed are available in the chat box. If you do have any other questions at all, please do email sales@intreface.com and we can run through those for you. I think we just had another question come through actually. So just to be clear then, we don't need to have a SIP connected to make calls with a rented Bitrix24 number. Yes, that's correct. So they are completely separate in what they provide you with. So the SIP connector, so either the Office PBX or the Cloud PBX, you only use that if you're wanting to integrate an existing number that you have into Bitrix24. That's using the SIP connector. A completely separate option, which does not use the SIP connector, is renting a number from Bitrix24. So if you were to rent a number, like if we were to rent say a toll-free number using the Bitrix24, so that's going to cost $6 per month. You do not use the SIP connector. That is completely separate. Okay. Okay, I hope that's clear. And if you do have any other questions about that, please just email sales@intreface.com. We will answer those questions for you, and we can set up a meeting to discuss your requirements in more detail. Okay, and coming soon, here are a selection of future webinars that will be running. So we run these webinars every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I hope you're able to join those in the future. And thank you for joining today. I hope you found the Total Telephony webinar useful and answered those questions for you.